with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville. It's located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so very delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. And that really is our mission, and we need your help. One of the ways that you can help us is to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Let them know that they can listen to us on the WREB AM FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. Now, you might be wondering how we accomplish this mission of helping families grow closer through reading. Well, we do it by introducing parents, teachers, caregivers to fascinating authors of all genres of kids' books. We have great conversations, thought-provoking, fun conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids. Our guest today, Ashley Belote, will be here to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's called Don't Wash Winston. And later in the show, we speak to Cooke. He is debuting his new graphic novel memoir. It's called Puzzled. Hey, are you ready to ignite a passion for reading in your students? Introducing bookandauthor.com, your gateway to literacy connections. With bookandauthor.com, connecting your school with talented authors of captivating kids' books has never been easier. Simply visit our user-friendly website and explore our extensive database of authors. Filter your search based on budget, genre, and availability. Discover the perfect match for your school and your students. But that's not all. With bookandauthor.com, you have the power to request a proposal. Let vetted authors come to you with their tailored ideas, ensuring an unforgettable literacy experience for your students. Don't wait any longer to inspire young minds through the magic of books. Visit bookandauthor.com today and open the door to a world of literacy connections. Bookandauthor.com, where literacy comes to life. Join us right now from the beautiful state of North Carolina. Our guest is here today to celebrate her beautiful picture book. It's called Don't Wash Winston. Please welcome to the show, Ashley Belote. Ashley, how are you?
For having me on. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so this is really exciting for me.
Well, I have to I met Ashley at the North Carolina Reading Association conference a couple of weeks ago. And it was hard for me to get to her because she always had a line at her table, people excited to meet her. And when I saw her a moment when one of the sessions was starting, I ran over and I just said, "Hi, I'm the host of the Reading with Your Kids podcast." And she goes, "I listened to that podcast." I'm like, well, made my day.
Yes, mine too. It was great. And, it's neat when you recognize a voice. And as soon as you said hello, it, picks right up. So it was great. It was great.
Well, I'm glad when you heard the voice, you didn't go running for help from a police officer or something. So tell us all about Don't Wash Winston, please.
Oh, absolutely. So this is my newest picture book with Macmillan, Don't Wash Winston, and it is all about a little boy named Liam who was afraid to put his teddy bear named Winston into the washing machine. He's afraid that he won't come back, and he can't see in there. He can't go in there with him. And that's sometimes really scary when you're not able to be with your best friend all the time.
I am thinking back to when my amazing daughter was 4 or 5 years old, and everywhere she went, she took her little unicorn named Uni. And I can't imagine, and I can't remember us ever putting Uni into the washing machine, and I'm sure my beautiful wife did on occasion, but I'm glad I wasn't around because I know that would have been a scene.
Oh, it's definitely a scene. It's a big deal. And there's Liam makes quite a scene throughout the book. I feel like most of us would, though. It's something that's so precious to you, and it's sometimes your whole world to have that comforting object with us. And, for it to go somewhere where you can't see it and you don't know if it's going to change while it's in there, I mean, it is a legitimate fear.
Oh, absolutely. I had an experience. If you've been listening to the podcast, I do educational magic shows at schools, and sometimes I'll teach magic. And I remember teaching a group of very young kids, 5 and 6 years old. Why I was trying to teach 5 and 6 years old magic, why I was doing it because I was getting paid. But why they thought it was a good idea, I don't know. But anyways, there's a change bag, something you can make out of a regular paper lunch bag. And you can create it so that you can put something in and it can change into something else. Or you can show the bag empty and something appears, or put something in and show that it disappears. So I've been working with these kids all day long, actually over a couple of days, to make this bag. And the kids knew how it worked, and they were playing with them. And I was showing the kids some different things you can do with it. And I asked one of the little girls if I could borrow her little stuffed animal. And she said, yeah, and she was my buddy. And so I put the animal in the bag, and I said, now the animal is gone. And I opened up the bag, and it was empty. And she started crying hysterically. And I'm like, no, dude, it's still, I'll make it come back. And then she stopped crying. But I'm like, you knew how that worked.
It's probably the shock, honestly.
Lesson learned. That was the last stuffed animal I borrowed for any kind of magic trick.
Yes, that's a way to lose your audience right off the bat.
So what was the inspiration for Don't Wash Winston?
So it's definitely somewhat autobiographical. And this actually was not an event that happened while I was a kid like you would think. So my favorite teddy bear, Winston, has been with me since I can remember, and has been with me through all of my moving around in life, and went to college with me. And I was coming home from college, and I was riding with a friend of mine. And so we had all of our stuff in the car, and I would never put Winston, in a bag with like my running clothes or something. He got the prime spot in the car every time. So I had my purse and my bear, and I just said, here, can you hold this? Because I was driving. And he was like, sure. So he holds the bear with, his stuff that he was holding, and we get to my house, and we get all my stuff inside, and he leaves. And I picked up my bear, and it smelled like a dude. What? And I was like, oh, no, this is not okay. And it smelled like his cologne. And I was like, oh, my gosh, what am I going to do? This does not smell like my bear. So I was home with my mom. This was for, Christmas break. And she's like, well, I guess we could put him in the and before she even said washing machine, I was like, oh, absolutely not. She's like, thank goodness. She's like, I could not have done that. There's no way. So I took dryer sheets and kind of rubbed Winston, and, eventually the smell returned to normal. But that was kind of the first inspiration. And I went shortly after that, I graduated and started studying children's literature at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, you get so inspired by being in a place like that, I had always kicked around the idea of illustrating my own words, and the title Don't Wash Winston came to me. And it has really been a very loyal concept over the past 10 years. It's kind of grown with me as I've grown as a bookmaker. And it's very rewarding to see it finally get its day in publication. So.
Wow. I love it. And I'm really glad you didn't decide to call it Winston Smells Like a Dude.
No, that was my first choice. But I was like, well, maybe I'll workshop that a little bit.
My beautiful wife still has her animal. I think it's not a bear. It might be a llama. I'm not sure, but its name is Cholene, and it survived. She's only 29, but it survived a long, long time, and it's still with her. And wow.
Oh yeah, we can't get rid of something like that.
Yeah,
Jolene and Winston, they're just part of our families, and that's just how it has to be. it's totally acceptable.
I agree. I agree. And I certainly wouldn't argue with my beautiful wife about that if I wanted to stay in the house.
Not that. Pick your battles, my friend. That's not one of them.
So how is it, you studied children's, illustrating children's book. How is having this career, is it everything that you dreamed of?
Oh, it's way better than I could have ever imagined. I still cannot believe that this is my life. Every single day I wake up and I have my books. Every time I have a new book come out, we get it framed. And my husband did this for my first book, Frankenslime, that came out in 2021. And so it's the first book that I pull out of every box of author copies that we get. And they're framed on my wall. And every day I walk into my art studio, and I can't believe this is my life. It's something that I have known I wanted to be an author and illustrator since I can remember. I can't remember a time in my life not wanting to do this. And I feel like I'm, really lucky in that sense that I was kind of born knowing what I wanted to do and dedicate my life to. And I'm just so extremely grateful to everything that has kind of transpired to get me here. So very, very grateful.
Well, we've had lots of folks on the show who have said, well, I thought about it, or I wrote a kid's book when I was young and then I kind of put it away. You really are the first person who said, now this has been it. This has been my dream. I've been laser focused on doing this, and it's wonderful that you're able to make your dream come true. Isn't it great when you have a job, but it's not really a job. It's what you do for fun.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's absolutely incredible. It is so much work. I work all the time, but like you said, it's not like work at all because it's something that you love so much. And no matter how hard it is, you just do it because you have to. It is like a part of you that has to manifest in creative ways. And I'm kind of a product of the publishing industry. Growing up, my family owned an indie publishing house. So I've always been around books and a book kid. But I've always kind of gravitated more towards the visuals. And in second grade, we had a project to write and illustrate a book. And that's when I started to kind of come around to the writing aspect of it and realized that, oh, okay, so I could use words to help my pictures tell a story versus, vice versa is, how a lot of other people work. But I'm so visual that I always start with pictures. So yes, it is absolutely incredible to get to do what I love and share it with kids in school visits and at libraries and bookstores. It's just an absolute dream come true. Lots of work, but.
So help me understand this process, because I'm not a visual artist by any means, but so you mentioning that you discovered that you could use words to help your pictures tell a story. Can you expand on that a little bit? How the story just wouldn't quite be complete if I didn't add these words.
Yeah, so, when you're writing a picture book, you're limited by word count and by page count. You're writing for an audience and illustrating for an audience that has a shorter attention span, so you have to, kind of cater to what they are going to be able to get out of it. So, maximum 500 words and 32 to 40 pages, for the most part, is not a lot of time to tell a story. So you use the words and the pictures together to get your points across. And for me, I always start with a picture. And even when I was illustrating other authors' words, the first thing that I would do is create a character, because I can't visualize a story unless I can see the main character that it's about. Mm-hmm. So when I'm both writing and illustrating, I always start with a character sketch or an illustration that kind of sparks an idea for a story. And it might have multiple characters in it, and then I'll kind of choose which one is kind of, the main, and then write a little bit about them, and then go back to drawing, and then, kind of ping pong back and forth. So for me, it very much happens as one singular process versus I write the story and then I add the pictures into it, or vice versa. And there are certain things that are easier for a kid to understand if you tell it to them versus try to show it to them. Mm-hmm. So that's when you kind of have to decide what you're going to show through the text versus what you're going to show through the illustrations. And it's a very delicate balance, and it's something that I think comes with time, and it comes with reading a lot of children's books. And I think that's what has really helped me is I will read books. I read books every single day. And, you know, readers make the best writers, and I think that's true for all genres, especially picture books.
Yeah. What's the difference, or how is it different when you're illustrating somebody else's book as opposed to illustrating and writing your own?
It's amazing how different the processes are. It really is. So, like, from the making process to the publishing process, it's quite different. When you are doing both, writing and illustrating, you're a little bit more involved in terms of the whole entire process because everybody's coming to you. You're one person doing both jobs. So you get to weigh in on like font choices and, you know, little things like that. And then when you're illustrator only, you're not, you know, privy to all of those types of details all the time. So, but in terms of the making, you know, a story really develops organically. And like I just said, for me, the words and pictures kind of come simultaneously as one package. But when I'm working on somebody else's work, like I said, I'll start with a character sketch. And typically I'll read the manuscript through one time and then create a character. And then I'll just kind of let my imagination flow and think about what this character would do on a daily basis and kind of draw them doing that. So when I illustrated Frankenstein by Joy Keller, I had this character in mind, and there's a sidekick dog named Igor. So I spent a day just kind of drawing what they would do. Would she walk Igor like a normal kid, or, you know, would she do something different? And just kind of create a routine for them. And then I'll go through and read the story again and find out fun ways that they deviate from their routine and make it and add in humor to the art that way. Humor is my big thing. So I always try to, you know, include some humor in the visuals, and that's really how my process works. But I do read the whole thing through one time and just kind of absorb, and then kind of set the story aside, work on the characters, and then return to the story itself.
Wow. Fascinating. I'm curious, when you get a manuscript, so you're working either on your own or another author's manuscript, is it set out? Does the editor tell you, okay, I need an illustration for these words, and I need an illustration in this part of the story? Or is that something you go through and you go, okay, right here, this is what I want to illustrate?
Yeah, you know, you have quite a bit of creative freedom when you're illustrating a book, and that's something that I love about this artistic field in general. So sometimes when you get a manuscript, you'll have art notes, and, you know, when authors include art notes, they are typically things that the illustrator would have to show in order for the story to make sense or move forward. But we always, you know, talk about art notes, and authors try to use them sparingly because the illustrator needs room to do their job too. So when an author is writing a story, they can include art notes if they're important, but the illustrator really needs room to work. And I've been fortunate, you know, with Frankenstein, I think there was like 2 art notes. So I had, you know, pretty much free reign. And when you're making a book, you know, it's certainly a team effort. So your art director is like your best friend. And so I basically am able to decide what to show because illustrators should illustrate beyond the text. Mm-hmm. You know, the text is already saying that Sally's at school. So make something interesting happen in the picture with school kind of being in the background. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can have kids interacting, and maybe some tension can be built in the art if something, like if some kid is about to fall off of the seesaw or something, you know, and you don't necessarily see those things in the words, but you do see them in the art. So you just try to bring an additional layer of story into the story as is. And so when you have creative freedom, the book is stronger because you're getting 2 completely different perspectives on the same series of events. So that's also why they try to keep the author and the illustrator separated, because they don't want you to influence each other creatively. So you each have your own like space to work, which is really nice.
That was the thing that really blew my mind when I started the podcast and started speaking to illustrators, authors, publishers, art directors, and I said, "Wait, what? They don't talk to each other?" I've had numerous authors and illustrators who've come on the show together, and it's like the first time that they've met and communicated with each other. One author came on and she just cried the whole time because she loved the artwork, and she's like, I never met you, so thank you so much. And it was really sweet. It was like, for me, it was like, what do you mean you don't work together when you're doing this?
Sorry, the whole business of this, just, from coming from the outside world, if you look in at publishing, it's so confusing how it all works. And, and I have a lot of friends who are, not in this business. And I'll tell them like, oh, I got a book deal and my book's and they're like, oh, great. Well, when can we buy it? And I'm like, in 2026. And they're like, oh, and they look at their watches. They're like, it's 2024. Yeah. So yeah, it takes forever. And then, when you talk about working with an author and they're like, oh, that's great. So do you guys just talk on Zoom or do you get together? And I was like, well, I've actually really not ever met Joy Keller, who wrote Frankenstein. And they're like, what? And, we had a similar thing happen. We did a little presentation together one time, and it was just us going, oh my gosh, I know that you did this, or oh my gosh, I didn't know that happened, because you have two completely different experiences. So yeah, it's bizarre. But when you think about it from the editorial perspective, it makes total sense. Yeah. So it's one of those things that you don't know unless you're actually interacting with the process.
Yes. Or if you're listening to the Reading with Your Kids podcast.
Exactly. Here you can learn all kinds of stuff.
When you're creating your illustrations and books, do you ever do anything mischievous, like, put like little, I guess they call it Easter eggs in the pictures, and you're not going to tell anybody, but if you meet someone at a conference, they go, I know what you did.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is my favorite part about being an illustrator. I love it. I love books that do this. And when I was a kid, those are the types of illustrations I would eat up. I would spend hours searching for little things. So yeah, I always try to hide, we call it a B story, when you can hide something or have, a side narrative happening in the art. And again, like I said, I'm a humor person. I love humor. I love to laugh. I love watching comedies and seeing funny theater shows. And so my B stories are typically funny things that happen. And in Don't Wash Winston, there is a hamster hidden on almost every page. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the hamster is right out front, and then sometimes it's hidden away. And I just came off of 2 days of packed school visits. And what I'll do is I'll read Don't Wash Winston, and about halfway through I'll say, oh, you guys, I forgot to tell you, there is a hamster who hides in this book. And they're like, oh, what? And then we have to go back and look and try to find the hamster. Also in Don't Wash Winston, this is the first time I've done this, is I hid my previous books that I've published with Macmillan in the art as well. So there's some spines of a couple other books I've worked on with them in there too.
Oh, that very clever. I love that. Storytelling and marketing at the same time.
You bet.
It's very 2024.
Yes.
Product placement.
Yeah.
I wonder how long it's going to be before Cooke says, hey, Macmillan, we'll pay some money if Winston drinks a Coke on page 32.
I would love to put Coca-Cola in it. You just let me know. I can add it right now.
You mentioned your other books. Is there another book you want to tell us about to make sure that we check out?
Oh, absolutely. So I also this year had the pleasure of having a Halloween book. Well, last year I had a Halloween book come out. It's called Witch and Wombat. And I also have a copy of that book. And Witch and Wombat was the first all-in holiday picture book that I've gotten to work with. That was Halloween out the wazoo. Oh my gosh. There's so much Halloween in this story. It's all about a witch named Wilma, and she is super excited to get a cat. So she goes to the pet store, and they're sold out. She has to have a wombat instead.
I love that. I love Wilma's wombat, Wilma the witch's wombat. I love that alliteration too.
Thank you. It was, that was one, in publishing, titles are a big thing. They're a big conversation. Kind of like with Don't Wash Winston. That was the original title. and it changed a few times, and then we ended up reverting back to the original. With Witch and Wombat, kind of the same thing. It started out being called A Witch and a Wombat, and then it changed to Wilma and a Wombat, and then back to Witch and Wombat because we decided to go all in on the Halloween theme.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, that's an interesting process in and of itself, is naming a book.
I'm sure it's because that cover art and that title are what grabs people's attention, and a lot of times that's all they consider before they decide whether they're going to buy the book or take it out of the library.
Oh yeah. It's people really do judge books by their covers.
Yes.
And that's just, you kind of don't have a choice though, because you're not going to sit there and read every single book in the store and then decide which one to buy. It's really kind of a gut feeling. And when you walk in and you are kind of observing, you pick out what catches your eye, and then you look at that one. And that's why the book industry is so great, because, there are books out there for every reader, and not every book is going to appeal to every reader. And that's fine. There are plenty of readers to go around. So that's why I think it's really important for authors just to make books that are like on their hearts and stories that they want to tell versus what they think people want to hear.
And I think that's very, very important. We do have a lot of authors and aspiring authors listen to the show. A lot of them come on and say, wow, I needed a book about X because my kids were experiencing that and I had to write that for them. And there's a place for that, and some great books come out of that. But I think the real classic books that, that kids have been reading for decades, I think they just came because someone woke up with a weird idea and decided to put it on paper.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I guarantee that's how it works.
Yeah.
And those classics didn't start out that way. They were someone's brand new idea at the time. And we've got to make sure that we continue to bring new ideas to the market to create future classics that kids are going to just eat up over years and years and years. And, we don't want something that's already been done. And it's really important, I think, to write from personal experiences too. I think you can be so much more connected to your work that way. And that's something that we all have in common, is we all have had a different life. Nobody has the exact same story. Mm-hmm. We have similar experiences and similar events and similar memories, but we are all unique and individual. And I tell this to kids all the time when we're drawing together, is even though we're all learning to draw the same character, they will all look different because we are all different and we all have our own way of translating our artwork onto the paper. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way with written stories. We all have a different story to tell. So yeah, tap into your own background and your own experiences and your story and tell those.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about it, who knows your story better than you?
Right, exactly. Nobody can write it better than you, and nobody can talk about your book better than yourself too, and it's really fun when you go to critique groups and other people read your work out loud. And sometimes I have great readers in my critique groups, but there's always that one sentence man, I really wish this sounded like this. And then you kind of have to rewrite it to, create the proper inflection, which is why it's great to hear your work, because how you want it to sound and how you want it to be read. So it's a manifestation of your own story and your own creativity, and you just have to try to get the delivery as best as possible so people pick up on those cues.
Yeah. You mentioned in critique group, somebody told me I needed a new logo, a new modern logo for reading with your kids. And so I was playing with something last night, and I showed it to my beautiful wife, and she's looking at it, and she's, who did this? And I said, well, I did. She goes, oh, it's horrible. I said,
I love it.
You didn't want to break somebody else's heart, but mine, no problem. And she's right. It was horrible. So, what advice do you have for parents out there who have these really creative kids who love to draw and create? What advice can you give to parents to encourage that creativity?
I think you just said it. Encourage that creativity. That is the answer. I think that, there's the stigma of the quote unquote starving artist has always just really irritated me to say that, because there's, when you major in art in college, sometimes people will say, well, what are you going to do for a job? Like, how are you going to make a living doing this? And, and if your kid wants to be an art kid, there are so many jobs out there, especially now, more than ever, because if you think about it, there is art in literally everything. Advertising, that is art. A cereal box, somebody had to design that, and that is art. And there's, books is just one avenue of, an artistic career. There's so many more options now: video game design, television, movies, books, anything. And art is all around us. And it's something that I think as a culture, we are becoming more proud of, which I think is great. There's so much more support for the arts now than there has ever been. And if the support's not there, there's a conversation about that, and art does tend to get taken out of schools during budget cuts and things like that. But I feel like there's more of a, like, that might not be a good idea kind of mentality happening. Or if that does happen, there's a conversation about, well, if we have to take this art class out, how do we supplement the creativity for the kids? There's more of a conversation about it. So yeah, I would encourage them to be their most creative selves. Some of them will grow out of it and change their passion. Some of them will just do it on the side as a hobby, which is fine. But some of them will go all the way and make it their life's journey to be an artist in some form or fashion. And I don't think that, with the state of the world, that we should squash anyone's creativity, because the next generation's got to be creative.
Absolutely.
And that's the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Inspiring your kids' creativity today as they're drawing, who knows, it could lead to them developing a cure for some disease, because they were encouraged to think out of the box.
Yes, and that's what art does. Art is not always, like, making a piece of art is not always the end goal. It's allowing your mind to open up to possibilities. And like you said, it could manifest itself in something like that in the medical field. It could manifest itself in so many different ways. But yeah, I never discourage creativity, and I love to see the kids. But especially at school visits, like yesterday, this little boy came up to me and he said that he wrote a story about a bunny. And I was like, well, let's look at it. So we looked at it and it was good. And, just taking the time, I think, to listen to their ideas. And, like, of course, some of them will make absolutely no sense. And those are sometimes the best ones. And, it's just spending time appreciating what they have created with their imagination. It will go so far.
Yeah. Well, we should find out how we can go and visit your website and find out more about you and all the great books that you've created.
Yes, I have a website. It's just my name, ashleybelote.com. I'm also on the socials. I'm on the social media. My Instagram and Facebook is at Ashley Belote Illustration. And I post a lot of my, like, process drawings and what I'm doing kind of thing on Instagram. Instagram is definitely the platform that I use the most. And I like it because it's so visual, probably.
Mm-hmm.
It's all pictures.
Yeah.
So my website, but my books are available online wherever books are sold. And it's so neat to see them on website pages and on bookshelves in stores. It's very, very special.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Don't Wash Winston. Our guest has been Ashley Belote. Ashley, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. Join us right now from Dublin in the Republic of Ireland. Our guest is here today to celebrate his graphic novel. It's a memoir. It's called Puzzled. Please welcome to the show, Pan Cooke. Pan, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. This is, according to my notes, this is your life story.
Yeah, well, it focuses on my younger years and growing up with OCD. So it's a big, it starts off when I'm about 10 and leads all the way into my late teenage years. So covers a good portion of my life anyway.
You know, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, it's a term that we hear a lot and people throw it around and people self-diagnose themselves. And I don't think we really understand what it really is. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, well, that's one of the goals of my book is I think OCD is really misunderstood, and that kind of general misunderstanding of it is what can contribute to there being such a long wait time between when symptoms start for young people and to when they seek help. So, as you said, a lot of people can use OCD as like an adjective, like I'm so OCD, or this is me being OCD. And it's also reinforced by depictions on television and things like that. Mainly, I think the go-to one that everyone knows is OCD. People with OCD love to keep things organized or keep things clean, where that's incorrect. Some people with OCD can have things to do with contamination, but when they are keeping things clean, it's not out of a preference or a personal quirk. It's in an attempt to kind of fight off anxious thoughts. So the idea that they have a preference for this is incorrect. It's more so a coping mechanism to deal with intrusive thoughts and obsessions, and it can present in any different way, specific to different people. I certainly had no issues with cleaning, and my parents would tell you that themselves. But yeah, it's so varied and so different, and that kind of the goal with my book is hopefully for younger people who might be suffering with a similar journey with OCD that I have, kind of have a greater awareness, and through that awareness then kind of set people on their first steps to getting help, because there is help available. It's just a matter of really knowing what it is, and then being able to tell people and to not have that shame that can come around it, especially when obsessions can present themselves with distressing thoughts or intrusive thoughts. The content of them can be quite disturbing, which kind of reinforces that the aspect of young people being embarrassed or shameful to speak to their parents or to their teachers. So the goal of the book is to kind of tell my story and how I experienced it, and then through that, hopefully, younger people can realize that if they are suffering with OCD, that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's a mental disorder that can be treated and helped.
This is fascinating, and I'm, that image of, the person who's constantly arranging things and making sure nothing is out of place. I thought that was the symptoms, but you're telling us that no, that's just a way to cope with the obsessive thoughts that are running through your brain.
Yeah. So the kind of core of OCD, again, it can vary a lot, but the most kind of standard would be that's OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, of course. So it begins for a lot of people with an intrusive thought or an obsessive thought. And then what people with OCD do is they act out compulsions, whether it be cleaning to fight off kind of intrusive thoughts to do with contamination, or in my case, it could be thoughts of morality and then compulsions to do with prayer, or it could even present without any obsession, and it just be for a feeling of kind of correctness. That's a subtype called just right OCD. But it's that cycle of having an intrusive thought, acting out a compulsion to neutralize the anxiety. The anxiety then there being relief, but it coming back and then reinforcing it again through acting out the compulsions. Then it becomes problematic then, because the person has to continue doing this, and by acting out the compulsions, although it may seem in the short term that it is curing the anxiety or just thought, it's actually reinforcing its power because you're interacting with it in that way, which is all stuff that I didn't know when I was growing up. And it's really helpful to know with someone who has OCD when it's happening, the kind of process at which it uses its, yeah.
Wow, thinking back, I had a friend in high school. He was a little bit younger than me, but he would tell me that every time he left his room at night, he had to say goodbye to everything in his room, and goodbye light stand, goodbye bed, goodbye this, and it really freaked him out. And I know I went to people who were older than me in my life, and I said, "Hey, this kid has this thing," and people kind of shrugged it off, and there was no hope. It's great to know that I'm guessing that he probably had some sort of issues with compulsion. I'm happy to know now that there's help out there for kids and adults who are suffering with this.
Yeah, again, I'm not a medical professional. I've dealt with it myself, so I can only say what worked for me and what I learned through my treatment. But cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure response prevention, ERP, is the go-to, which it sounds quite simple, but it's obviously quite difficult for people who are so enamored with these obsession compulsions, where the goal is kind of like, compare it to jump into a swimming pool. You expose yourself to your triggers, your obsessions, and then rather than act out with the compulsion, the goal is to sit with the anxiety until it peaks. The same way if you get into a cold pool, at first it's cold, and then it kind of, after a while, it eases. And it's all about kind of putting yourself in that position, and then through a process of I always pronounce it wrong. Habituation. I'm not going to pronounce it, but it's basically through doing it over and over again. You kind of train your body and your mind to surpass it. And it's also about not engaging with intrusive thoughts, or not trying to get rid of them, but by accepting them and letting them. Because intrusive thoughts everyone has an intrusive thought. Whether everyone's had that thought if they're driving their car, what if I could just turn the steering wheel now? But people with OCD interact with them differently, whereas most people will just let them kind of come into frame and disappear. People with OCD are so kind of disturbed by them that they interact with them, and then ironically through this interaction, you actually give them their power. So it's just about accepting intrusive thoughts, not interacting with them, and then also through help with a therapist, kind of learning to sit with the anxiety that they trigger, and rather than acting out the compulsions.
This is really fascinating. So you were mentioning in your own case, your intrusive thoughts dealt with morality, and I'm guessing that you thought you were doing something that was wrong, and you dealt with it by praying. Tell us. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no. When I was it first presented when I was very young, and it was mainly before going to sleep. I would have intrusive thoughts, or also to do it just right. I wouldn't feel comfortable unless I said the Hail Mary 3 times. But then 3 times turned into 3 sets of 3, and then eventually you get to the point where, did I mess up a word, or did I offend God? And it can go for longer and longer, whereas a lot of the times it would take up the majority of my night. And so my way of contextualizing it was, obviously I was so young, I didn't know what was happening at first. I thought maybe it was God speaking to me. And then through my first introduction to the movie The Exorcist by an older brother, I then thought the devil had possessed me. And I dealt with all that for a good few years. And then as I grew, and I wasn't as involved in the church and stuff, it morphed, as OCD normally does. It can go along with you and attach itself to your beliefs or your interests. Where then after I didn't have to pray anymore, it then became about brushing my teeth. So it was just OCD. I like to think of it as it's wearing a mask, but at its core, it's still the same thing. And as my book mentions, because I didn't understand it at all, I called it the puzzle. And I whenever I was acting out these compulsions, whether it be praying or brushing my teeth, I was kind of in my head being like, I'm trying to solve this puzzle, and doing my compulsions was a way for me to put a different piece into the puzzle and try to solve it. And then throughout my experience, I eventually learned that the whole goal of OCD is to just not try to solve the puzzle, and just to get on with your life and do something else. But yeah, it can present itself in many different ways. I even had small, like other than the long-lasting compulsions, I would have things with my memory in terms of there was an event where one of my classmates was in the hospital and we had to sign a get well card, and I wished him my best. But then when it had been handed back up to the teacher in the envelope, I started thinking, what did I write? What if I wrote something terrible? What if I wrote something really offensive? And then in situations like that, the compulsion would be to check the card. But because I couldn't, I kind of had to deal with this intense anxiety. And that can happen in any number of different ways. So it's not just the long-lasting compulsions, but you can also have things to do with, even like writing an email. You can send an email and be like, did I write something offensive in that? And then having to go back and check and reread and stuff. So it can be very debilitating because it can present itself in any facet of your life and every day-to-day life as well.
Wow. You mentioned earlier that you were starting to deal with this around age 10. When was it that you understood that this was something that you needed help with, and how did you get the help?
Well, I was in my late teens, and I'd been to my doctor and stuff, but it wasn't picked up. I think I have a great doctor. I think that was mainly due, again, to young people with OCD are very good at hiding it, because a lot of the time compulsions, in my case as well, were mental, and my physical compulsions were at nighttime, and there was an element of shame around it, so I did keep it a secret. There came a time then when the internet became like, when I was much younger, the internet wasn't around, and then my late teens, I started to get very obsessed with my health and to do with diseases and stuff. And then one night, kind of acting out my same anxious behavior, Googling symptoms or early symptoms of diseases, I decided to Google instead, why am I obsessed with being sick, as opposed to why am I sick? And I stumbled onto OCD myself. And that was a really liberating moment. But I did learn later that although I was able to give a new name to this puzzle in my head, other people didn't understand it still, even when I told them I might have OCD, because, again, this kind of general misconception of what OCD is. But then I went to my doctor, who referred me to a cognitive behavioral therapist, and really set me on the path to, OCD is a long-term disorder, but it's manageable once you know the steps and once you know how it works and what you need to do. To this day, I can see myself, I'll get a new intrusive thought or a new compulsion, but I know now what I need to do to treat it, and I also understand it. It's also great not to have to keep it a secret. So all these things kind of together can make, you can live a perfectly normal life. It can be a difficult journey, going through therapy, but it helps there and it works.
Were there things, and this is not to put blame on anybody, but were there things in hindsight that may have given your parents or family members like, oh, this kid needs some help. We should, things parents should be looking for or being aware of in their own kids?
I suppose repetitive behavior that can be a symptom of compulsions, obviously. But again, OCD is so varied that it's just very difficult to give kind of warning signs. And again, I think if your child looks distressed, or certain things can trigger distress, whether it be things being a certain way or stuff, it's likely that this is not because your child has a preference towards a certain way or a personality quirk, but it's more likely that it's an action they're doing to treat intrusive or obsessive thoughts. But yeah, I think I can only speak from my experience, and again, I'm not a medical professional, so I don't want to give any specific advice, but I think if kids are anxious and they seem to be focused on different activities, that could probably be one of the more obvious signs.
Yeah. I think it's really important to, and again, it's, what this podcast is all about is being close with your kids, having conversations with your kids. And hopefully if they're having these intrusive thoughts, they'll feel more comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, this is really bugging me. I'm really anxious about this. I need some help.
Yeah.
You were mentioning that you dealt with it through cognitive behavioral therapy. Does that mean without the use of drugs?
I was medicated when I was younger, but I had a patch in my 20s when I was dealing with different things that made it worse. And I did have a period where I used medication. I was using sertraline, which is a common SSRI, which is used for OCD. I think the ideal thing is talk therapy and then if needed medication as well. I did both. And then after a while, I was able to stop medication and continue on with therapy. It's just, I think it's what works and what it was called for.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of talking first, before we try medication. And that seems less intrusive to me.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that is the kind of go-to. I was told anyway that to start with talk therapy. And sometimes if the compulsions obsessions are especially difficult to treat, medication can help through the therapy process and then come off again. But again, I don't want to be giving anyone medical advice. I'm just talking from my own personal experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now that the book is out there, now the graphic novel is out there, how does it feel to be an author?
Well, it's not officially out now till April 16th, so 2 weeks today, I believe. But it's really exciting. It was my first book. It is my first book. I haven't been doing cartoons and comics for very long, so it was a very learning curve process writing it, but I absolutely loved it. It was a really enriching and fulfilling experience. And I'm super excited to get it out in the world and hear what people think. And, hear from readers, especially kids who might have be experiencing something similar to what I did.
Yeah, yeah. And now that you are an official published, well, I guess official on the 16th, but the books are there and they're ready to go and to be shipped, and maybe they're in the back rooms of some bookstores all around the country and all around Europe. Are you intending to continue to write graphic novels?
I am, yeah. It's my dream, and that is something I've got things in the works in the background, which I probably can't speak about just yet, but the hope is anyway. The dream is to keep doing it. It's just if people keep reading me.
Yeah. And where do you see, this is obviously a memoir, and I suppose if you live, when you live another 20, 30 years, you can write another memoir. But in the meantime, where do you think your stories will go? Will they be autobiographical, or are you looking to do fantasy or science fiction, or what?
I have so many different interests and passions that I try to throw a wide net. There's so many different things I'd love to try and do. So it's hard to say. I would like to try everything there. I've done a lot of work in social activism and things like that, which I wouldn't mind doing something maybe in a longer format. But it's just exciting now to see what the future holds as I grow as an artist and a cartoonist and a storyteller.
Wonderful. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Puzzled and also find out more about you.
You can find me on Instagram under the Fake Pan. That's my username. I've got a few comics there I've made about Puzzled and what my goal is with it. So I think they'd be a good insight into what I was thinking and what I'm hoping for it. And Puzzled should be, as you said, available in most bookstores and on Amazon and on Penguin. So, yeah.
Awesome. We've had a really great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Puzzled, a new graphic novel from our guest, Pan Cooke. Pan, thanks so much for being with us. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, please be sure to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. That's the place to find our Drawing with Your Kids series and our STEM is Family Fun series. You're going to love those series. Really, really fun activities you can do with your kids. We'd also love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can check out our blog, download our free online magazine, visit our Reading With Your Kids Certified Great Read Wall of Fame, and use the contact button up at the top of the page to send us a message. And if you're an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how you can be a guest here on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, it gives you the chance to tell thousands of Kidlit fans all about your great kids' books, and it doesn't cost a thing. You can also learn about our very effective and very affordable promotional services. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guests, Ashley Belote and Pan Cooke. Also want to thank our great sponsors, and I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Nick Warner, Kyoko Ito, Kayla Newland, Kristen Barrett, Sydney Swan, Hannah Rose. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. You do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.